Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host Greg Thompson along with my partner in crime Aaron Quinn. Aaron, it's Jags week. We're on to another one. We're done with the bye. It's going to be coming hot and heavy week after week now. How we doing?
This is a weird stretch, dude. This is a weird stretch for me right now. If this week has been a little bit odd because we came off a win, but Twitter and like interacting with Bills fans didn't feel victory Monday-ish, victory week-ish. And then this week just sort of got out of control arguing about that Miami game and what happened in that first half, that I was a little bit behind the ball this week on Jacksonville. And then when I started digging into Jacksonville, I was like, man, I messaged you. I'm having a hard time getting up for this game, and we're only in the middle of the season, Greg, and I'm having a tough time getting up for digging into Jacksonville. So I'm hoping tonight with our guest, this is a good opportunity for me to get back on the track and get excited for the season again.
Yeah, it's always interesting. You get into this stretch. The Bills are probably going to have 3 straight games here as double-digit favorites, and that you don't want to thankfully we have a coach like Sean McDermott who will never let the team look ahead or get into anything like that where they're not taking an opponent seriously. But as fans, sometimes it's tough to be able to get focused and to have that same energy overall. But that's why we don't take things lightly on this show, and we don't take it upon ourselves to know everything about opponents. So we reached out to our friends at the BLEAV Podcast Network, Jags Wire, and brought in our friend James Johnson. James, how are we doing, sir? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I can't complain. I mean, other than, having to watch the Jags for, the last few weeks.
Well, I got to say, at least I saw you on Twitter. At least you had Tuesday night. Congratulations on the Braves World Series. It's a nice high to have that side of it. But unfortunately, we're going to bring you back down a little bit with the Jags here.
Yeah, that actually was the highlight of my Sunday. I was hoping it was going to be the highlight of my Sunday, was watching the Braves, but they didn't win that game. So I was like, okay, let's put this celebration off for another 2 days. And then between that time, I got to watching the Jaguars on film, man. And it just brings you down. But at the same time, man, it's like I tell our people on the BLEAV in Jags podcast, one thing we can always smile about is the fact that we got Trevor Lawrence. And that's something we've never been able to look back on and reflect on and say, hey, the quarterback position is fixed. But it appears that it may be that way, albeit he struggled against Seattle. But for the most part, he's made some strides.
Well, so I want to, off of that topic of Trevor Lawrence, I want to ask you why I got you here. This is a really weird situation because you do have that number one pick. Maybe they're talking generational talent, Andrew Luck type come in and have that type of success. That's exciting. But then his first year is paired with Urban Meyer, and everything that's gone on with Urban Meyer coming to this team and sort of that dysfunction that he has brought with him. Has that soured this first season? Do you feel like, I know outside of people that don't cover the Jaguars, I think a lot of people think Urban Meyer might be a one and done. Do you think this is a lost year for Trevor Lawrence and what is, at the early stages of a young quarterback's career, really important foundational pieces? Is this a lost year for Jaguars fans, or do you feel like he's building up real stuff to go forward with?
Yeah, well, I think that the season has soured the fans because we all know that the North Florida community does like Urban Meyer. A lot of them do, at least.
Right.
The likeness of him is better there than in other parts of the country aside from Ohio, right? So, I think a lot of the fans came into the equation, they were buying what he was selling. And I mean, you can kind of understand it because they saw what he did at UF, albeit that's in college. But literally everywhere he's gone, he's taken programs from the cellar to the mountaintop, basically. So I think the fans were a little bit hopeful of what, he could do in terms of, not necessarily get this team in the playoffs, but make them look better than they have. But that has not been the case. So, yeah, I think because of how the fans bought into Urban Meyer, that they are a bit soured on him. For me and Phil on the BLEAV in Jags podcast, we don't feel as much of a letdown as they do because we weren't high on Urban Meyer in the first place. Yeah. So I guess it varies between who you ask, the journalist side or you asking the fan base side. The fan base, a lot of them probably definitely are feeling let down from that standpoint. But at the same time, I think like what has really, really made people optimistic though is the fact that despite all of these distractions and despite all of this craziness that's going on with Chris Doyle, that hiring was terrible, just not a wise idea. And Urban Meyer getting fined in training camp, and then the bar incident is that Trevor Lawrence, through all of this, has remained focused and has been able to do what he does best. And that just shows you just like what he's made of, because that's what we've seen it. Like we've heard the stories many, many times. Like this dude has literally been the guy since middle school. Like they probably started looking at him out of middle school and saying like, this is the guy that belongs in the NFL. And he just shows that like nothing really bothers him, like through the Urban Meyer controversy that again, the most recent one was the bar incident. He remained focused and on task. And you can argue that he was having his best gains while that stuff was going on in the media, which is, that's kind of telling on his part. But yeah, at the same time, like we just wish some wins would come with it. And, like Urban Meyer is starting to wear on the fan base for sure. And if they didn't have Trevor Lawrence, this fan base will really be at the stadium ready to burn the place down.
So, and I know, as we go into some of the breakdowns and everything here, it's going to be interesting, and make sure to let us know how you're kind of isolating how you go from, overall, and is it affecting the wins this year versus saying, okay, who really matters towards the future and who's going to be the guys that we need to pay attention to being here for the long haul versus, just guys that are trying to put up film for their next job. And Aaron, you go right into the offense for that.
Yeah, well, real quick, Greg, I don't know if you have the graphic up. Before we dig into the offensive side of the ball, because something that's going to impact this is the injury report for the Jaguars. What do you guys have right now? Because I was looking around right before the show here just to get an updated one, and I didn't see an updated one, so I know Greg had it here. So can you kind of update on what we as Bills fans should expect with this injury report come Sunday?
Yeah, I was looking at it prior to when I came on to you all's show. And so, yeah, and we knew this was going to be the case with the running back, James Robinson, the heel injury he sustained. He didn't practice, but Urban Meyer said he was going to be questionable earlier in the week. So the status is not filled for him right now, but Urban Meyer has said it himself, at least, if you want to go off of his word, what his status will be. So that's a 50-50 chance. I would think like, he's so important to the offense that if he's not like close to like 100% or 80%, they're not going to put him out there. You can't blame him because he's so vital to Trevor Lawrence's success and this offense's success. Ben Bart, you would think like, 9 times out of 10, we see like an illness, 9 times out of 10, by the time the week is over with, they're ready to go. So, he'll be ready to go. That's a starting guard for them. And, like some of the most of the other guys, you probably don't have to worry about in terms of their status. I think they'll be able to go. Tyson Campbell should be able to go. He was full. That's a good indication for him. Devon Hamilton, he also is a starter with Campbell. He was full, so he should be able to go. So the one to watch is really, I would say, probably James Robinson.
With Robinson, so every team's a little bit different. Here in Buffalo, it's basically like if they don't get at least one full practice, we sort of assume that they're not going to go game day, right? Is that probably the same for Jacksonville? Like if we're watching the injury reports, Robinson, my fantasy team, if I'm watching for my fantasy team, if he's not a full participant here throughout the week, I'm guessing he's just going to be a scratch.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to jump to conclusions, but if he comes on the injury, the final one, if it's questionable, me personally, I wouldn't feel confident in him playing because I just think they're not going to push him, and they shouldn't, because he's really all they have on offense aside from a few other guys.
So let me jump right into that because we'll start with that offense side of the ball. When I was looking into this matchup, that's really what stands out, right? Is the running game is really all that they've been able to really get going and generate on offense. One, why do you think that is? Because it's kind of weird. They've also played from behind quite a bit. So playing from behind and generating a run offense doesn't seem to be a good way to get back in games. But it's also been successful. It's been their one real consistent success on offense. So what's going on with this run game? And if Robinson's unable to go, we know Urban Meyer didn't kind of shied away from him to start the season, then went to him. Now going back to Carlos Hyde as your primary back, what's that going to look like? And is it going to be as dynamic as we've seen so far?
Yeah, I think, well, they simply lost two of their best players that would help them with explosiveness and help them on the perimeter. And that's DJ Chark and Travis Etienne. They lost Travis
Yeah.
Etienne in the actual preseason and lost DJ Chark week 4. So when you talk about explosiveness and speed on the outside, they lost arguably their two fastest players, so that put them in a predicament. They already were picking first overall, so it's not like a plethora of talent on his team. That put them in a predicament where really James Robinson is the only guy. And I mean, Marvin Jones, excuse me, is a pretty good receiver, veteran savvy. He knows the system. And then they also have on the perimeter Jamal Agnew. Coincidentally, both of those guys worked with Darrell Bevel in Detroit.
I was a big fan of Agnew in free agency and was
Yeah.
targeting him as a possible returner, gadget guy here in Buffalo.
Right.
And we all love Chenault too here at Cover One. We enjoyed him in the draft process.
Right. So yeah, I mean, like those two guys are the guys you probably could watch on the outside. Aside from that, they've been struggling at receiver. Chenault, who you just mentioned, has been struggling. He's struggling with drops. I think like what they probably need to do to help out this run game to answer your question is to put Chenault back there too for some snaps, if we being honest. Because last year that's what they did. They moved him everywhere. He took snap. He was Cordero Patterson basically for the Falcons. And he was pretty good. Like he didn't really lose yardage. He was, running for 5 yards a pop or whatever the case may be. And I think that's how they can get him in a rhythm, is handing him off the ball and then flanking him out as a receiver as the game goes on. So we'll see if they do more of that. He did get one snap at running back I think it was at the end of the game against the Seattle Seahawks.
Yep. Now, let's move to this line here before we start talking about your guys' prized possession, Trevor Lawrence here. This offensive line, obviously the Bills, there's a lot of talk about Andrew Norwell this week because that was Greg's favorite. He even TikToked about it. And we were, a lot of conversation about him, really the stud of your guys' unit there, and some questions of whether or not the Jags would move on from him or keep him to protect Lawrence for the rest of the season since he's the prized possession. But really outside of that, there's some names that people recognize, but the play hasn't been great along the offensive line, probably below average across the board. This is a big one because the Bills have been generating pressures, haven't been getting the sacks like we thought they would be. I do see this as an opportunity for the Bills to maybe fluff up some of those sacks, and it's really the way to attack Jacksonville, right? If we can get some pressure on Lawrence, just like all rookies, just like all quarterbacks in the league, his stats are going to go down. That's going to make it an easier day for Buffalo. How do you see that Jacksonville offensive line, keeping the Bills are going to probably mostly rush 4. How are they going to keep this 4 from getting to Trevor Lawrence and making an impact on him?
Yeah, I would think with this team, I'm along the lines of that. The offensive line is okay, but that definitely didn't reflect in Sunday's game against the Seattle Seahawks. And I'll tell you why. My personal theory is that this Jacksonville Jaguars team, they're like the 4th youngest team in football. They don't come out of byes well, out of time off well. And we saw that week 1 against the Texans, right? They had 2 weeks off before the regular season and looked just like straight crap. And I'm of the belief that they're so young that they just don't handle their time off well. And they come out of bye weeks and time off just looking terrible and lethargic. That being said, with protecting Trevor Lawrence, you're right. That's how you get to him. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks showed that he was roughed up the most he's probably been all season, if you could argue. But if you look at the games prior, like the 3 or 4 games prior, that Cincinnati game, the Miami game, if you notice when they kept him upright, the guy was, he was a little bit of a problem to stop. So I think that they'll just, they'll line up straight up just like they have been against Miami, against the Cincinnati Bengals and what have you. And they will just hope that the further away they get from the bye, that those guys play better. And I think they will. That's not to say they're going to be elite or anything and that the Bills aren't going to be able to get pressure on them. But I do think they'll have a better outing than they did. And what I'm saying is don't expect to see what you saw against the Seattle Seahawks. Expect a little bit better than that. They had a lot of penalties too, by the way. So we'll see. Time will tell on that. They are a young team and they are Urban Meyer coach team too. Right. So they might come out and
So-
look like crap again. You know?
The most exciting thing for me in this game is to get my eyes on Trevor Lawrence, right? Like I watched some of the stuff leading up to the game, but this is exciting for me as a guy that he's going to be around a long time. One of those top quarterbacks that is in the AFC. He's probably going to be competing with Josh, hopefully here for the next 10 years. This is your time, man. You're on a show of another team. Gush about Trevor Lawrence for a second. How has he been this year? What have you liked? Where do you see this going? The floor is yours.
Yeah, this is often the best part of all the podcasts that I'm on. But yeah, like simply put, he has made throws that we haven't seen in Jacksonville since Mark Brunell, if that. And the thing about him is, yeah, he started off slow. We all saw the statistics. He had a lot of turnovers the first 3 games and this, that, and the other. But as we've grown to know about Trevor Lawrence, nothing bothers him. Over time, those last 3 weeks, after those first 3 weeks, the Bengals, like I said, the Miami Dolphins, he flashed at times against the Titans. After that, he cut down on the incompletions and the interceptions dramatically. He's a guy that, he still is reading some of the route concepts a little bit slow and whatnot, but you definitely can tell the game is slowing down for him. And you definitely can tell that one day he's just going to be at the forefront of this offense. I can recall in the Seahawks game, if y'all watched that one, he was on the sideline coaching up Tavon Austin. We all know Tavon Austin is like 30, 31 years old, of how to break off a route, and how to shorten a route that actually ended up being a pick on Trevor Lawrence's part. So that just kind of shows you like the leader that he's going to be down the road, and his mindset. And I guess we couldn't be happier to have him because, as everybody knows, and Bills fan can relate to this, right? It took us a while to be able to get the guy at quarterback. And, again, I literally said it, from Mark Brunell to now, like we really haven't had that guy. And, here we are. But it's a matter of they have to build around him, and they got to be more aggressive as a front office around him.
So let's flip to the other side of the ball, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see here because the Jags defense has a lot of names that Bills fans remember from the draft and that you're really excited about. Everybody, loved the athlete, Miles Jack and the other Josh Allen, being there off the edge. And in that front, there's names that people recognize. And Devon Hamilton was a guy that I really liked coming out in the draft to be able to stick in the middle, and Clavon Chason. So going through, you've had, I think Elam has really come through. You've had your moments with Miles Jack. But maybe what has been the challenge where some of the other names haven't been able to produce at the level that was expected? We haven't seen everything come together. I like the idea of adding Robertson Harris this year, that kind of veteran guy in that front group. Maybe why hasn't that gelled a little bit more or brought more of the pressure and sound, presence up front than maybe what was expected?
Yeah, well, the previous regime before this regime with Dave Caldwell, the GM, that he's now with the Eagles, with like an executive job, but they showed us exactly what it is that this defense need, because that defense prior needed it, and they need that alpha. They need that guy. They need a Calais Campbell in the trenches to help everybody to play better, because that was the issue with the last set of Jaguars. They had Yannick Ngakoue. They had a bunch of young guys. They just didn't have that guy in terms of an alpha and experience in the trenches. And the Jaguars sorely miss, a Calais Campbell-like presence down there. So heading forward, they're going to have to add that. And I think that's the big thing. And I think the other thing that's what's wrong with this defense is that the approach they took in free agency, right? They went for a bunch of mid-tier signings. You mentioned one, Roy Robertson Harris. Yeah. Again, for a team this young, you have to get at least one top-tier signing, especially in the trenches, to make it work. But if you put a bunch of, which is what they did, a bunch of mid-tier players together, a lot of guys like, Jihad Ward, we love him to death. He's a great guy on social media. But, it was times where Jihad Ward was inactive for the Baltimore Ravens, right? So, when you get a bunch of guys of that magnitude that, are not necessarily poor players, but mid-tier players, and put them all together, this is the result you get. And then also part of it too is they They're trying to run things the Baltimore Ravens way, right? They're trying to be a Baltimore Ravens like defense. They have Joe Cullen. The problem is, they aren't that great in man coverage. That doesn't help. And they come out and basically said that over the weeks, and that's something they're going to have to work on too. So we'll see what happens down the road. But they are the side of the ball that people are very, very pessimistic about. Whereas the offense, at least you can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
So moving back into that back seven again, I was excited about. Rayshon Jenkins was a guy that I was looking at. Shaq Griffin, obviously, and then in the draft, the athletic upside of Tyson Campbell. Around here we know Andrew Cisco from Syracuse. There was a lot of folks looking at that, being okay, that's a lot of talent to add all at once, and then you do it with athletic upside in the draft, but a solid veteran presence with Jenkins and Griffin, and you even have kind of a pleasant surprise in Wingard. Like, he's been a nice, scrappy addition, but isn't afraid to put his face in there to anything. Again, it shocked me. I saw some of the stats going by. I see some of the games here or there. I was really surprised how big of a weakness the secondary was with the amount of investment that went into it. That's got to be a little frustrating to see.
Absolutely. And part of it too with Cisco, as you said, like, the fans are, they're highly upset about this, and rightfully so. One issue the Jacksonville Jaguars have had under Urban Meyer and Trent Baalke, they're not using their rookies, not named Trevor Lawrence. They're not making them active as they should be, aside from Tyson Campbell. They were trying to get Jay Tufel in there, the defensive tackle from USC. They were trying to work him in there. He broke his hand in warm-ups in London. So he's sidelined for at least 3 weeks or less than that now, because he's been on IR. But this secondary, they put a lot of resources into it. But again, they didn't put an alpha into it. I think Andre Cisco is an alpha, but the problem is they won't know that until they get him on the field. And that's unfortunate. I know he's coming off of, the ACL situation last year with Syracuse and what have you. But for whatever reason, they just been slow and dragged their feet about getting him out there. And it's about time. I know you mentioned Andrew Wingard and how he's not scared to stick his nose in there. But yeah, we would like to see Cisco get more snaps over Wingard, or at least balance it out, give him 50-50 on snaps or something like that. But they're putting him out there, Cisco, like 2 or 3 snaps on defense and more so on special teams. And that's unacceptable, especially with a ball hawking talent like him.
I was on mute there for a second. Sorry. James, can you break this game down for us a little bit? How do you see this one going? And we're going to put you on the spot here and get a prediction from you before we send you on your way.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say you put me on the spot. I put it in the USA Today paper, the Sports Weekly, if anybody want to go out there and get it. So y'all getting a sneak preview of what I put in there, at least from the score perspective. I think it was along the lines of like 14-31, something like that. Because, Vegas does. And then when I thought about it, that's right along the line what Vegas has them down for, 14 points or something like that, I think. So, yeah, that sounds about right somewhere in there. My numbers might be off a little bit. So yeah, in terms of what I'm predicting, I'm predicting the Bills. I know they came out a little sluggish against the Miami Dolphins, but they shouldn't have any issues moving the ball against this offense, especially right out of the jump. And that's how you beat this Jags team. You hit them in the mouth right out of the gate. You make sure they don't establish any momentum from the beginning, because that can trickle into the second, third, fourth quarter, like we saw in Miami, right? Or against Miami. So I think if the Bills play to their talent, come and smack them in the mouth like they should, and Trevor Lawrence will probably have a better game, but at the end of the day, they can't stick with them. And I think Josh Allen will especially have a great game against the secondary. Again, they're not great in man coverage. They're not great in covering crossers. They struggle with a lot of things. And I think Josh Allen is really, really going to take advantage of them, because, for crying out loud, Geno Smith, who's nowhere near on Josh Allen's level, he threw straight 12 consecutive passes against his secondary, that were completions, and that's telling. So just imagine what Josh Allen's going to do against them. So we don't quite have the dogs yet to stick with them. maybe, in a year or two, it'll be a better result. But I mean, who knows? Maybe the Jags shock us. I mean, they shocked us a few times this year.
Any given Sunday, right?
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the beating of the Dolphins. That was a great game to watch.
Yeah.
I was having a great breakfast watching it with my family over in London.
Of course, a division rival for y'all, right? I mean, I know y'all ate that up. I mean, it's just like when we see people beat up on the Steelers, longtime rivals of ours. We don't mind that at all, man.
So I appreciate it, man, for everybody listening. Great segment from James. You can find him on the BLEAV Podcast Network, Jags Wire. James, let them know anywhere else they can find you, your Twitter handle, and anything other work you have coming up.
Yeah, it's at sportsgrind_done is where you can find me on Twitter, my personal Twitter. And then our pod is BLEAV in Jags Pod, at BLEAV in Jags Pod, at the Jaguars Wire is where you can find the Jaguars Wire. And we put up an episode for BLEAV in Jags every Wednesday or Thursday. It depends on when our guest comes in. This week it'll be Wednesday. No, it'll be Thursday. Today is Wednesday. So it'll be tomorrow that we get that new episode up. And we'll have a preview for Behind Enemy Lines preview and the Buffalo Bills as well for anybody that wants to check that out.
Awesome. Appreciate it very much, man. Appreciate your time. Great segment. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
So awesome job by James. It's a lot of fun to be able to get a perspective, especially
it's tough, man. We've gone through. We did Houston this year. Obviously, Miami's tough, and we're friends with Tom, and I follow him on Twitter. That's a very tough time for Tom right now. So pour one out for our guy there.
And I'll even give the Jags are in a more hopeful spot than
only because of Trevor Lawrence. Right.
But still,
that's the golden goose.
You have the centerpiece. And I don't know, for anybody who isn't watching, I'll try to find it and retweet it. There is a video floating around with just the sarcastic heading of, why can't Trevor Lawrence find anybody open? And it's a clip of him standing tall in the pocket, about to get crushed, unloads a laser 25 yards downfield directly in the hands of the receiver as he gets crushed, and they drop the pass. Right. And it just has a heading of, why can't Trevor Lawrence find anybody downfield? He's so far head and shoulders above maybe everybody besides Marvin Jones and James Robinson on that offense that it's at least something for them to hold on to.
If there's anyone or anything that can ruin Trevor Lawrence, the most generational talent of quarterbacks I've probably in my adult life, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. And that would be my concern as a Jaguars fan. If there's anyone or the Lions, those are the two franchises. It's unfortunately for our friends here, it's like the Sabres. They just have such a long, bad track record that if there's one team that can ruin a great prospect, it's that team.
Honestly, that's one of the biggest areas that I think is the biggest concern to losing Brian Daboll is Jacksonville. I think he'd go there because you have Trevor Lawrence, and that if you get the Cons money and you get Urban Meyer out of there and give him control, that's a spot where I could see, if you're going to leave, you're going to want to hit yourself to a young, powerful quarterback, and that would be the guy. So
right.
And before we dive into some of the fantastic graphics that you had, now that we move from James, let's take a look at the Bills injury report here. We have, for the most part, no surprises. We saw during the game Cole Beasley kind of reach back at his ribs and back area. You saw him kind of tough that out. Not sure how serious or bad that is. Spencer Brown's still a DNP with the back. That's starting to get a little bit concerning. I'd like to see a limited at some point here. Calf injuries are funny, so I certainly don't want to rush that. We know Dawson Knox with the hand surgery that was already communicated to be kind of a 3 to 4 week thing. So I'm not. Spencer Brown's the one that concerns me out of this whole list.
The Feliciano one too, not to scoff at anyone's injury. When you were the calf thing, we don't want to rush that. We also kind of want to see what. I don't know that there's no upgrade to Feliciano in this roster, but there might be something else.
Sure. Well, and you go through with that kind of combination of, I would be more excited if Spencer Brown was healthy and back, and we were seeing Darrell Williams at right guard, Spencer Brown at right tackle, and then it was just like Bacher in there, rather than both Bacher and Ford, and then having to move Williams and all the triple moves when those things happen. So I'd feel better here. If we're just being conservative with Beasley, Feliciano, and Knox, so what? That's totally fine.
Now's the
let
time
him sit,
to do
let him
it.
get rest. Yeah, 14.5 point favorites.
The next 2 weeks
yeah.
is the time to, if you're gonna pull that conservative use of the injury report card. I've never seen a better window lined up for him. But yeah. I do agree with you here, Greg. The Spencer Brown one concerns me clearly the most. I think if this was like a major game this weekend, I have every instinct that Cole Beasley would play. 100%. I hope that they keep him out. I tweeted it at you. I'd love to see a look at Gabe Davis, and I'd like to get a look at Isaiah McKenzie in this offense, because I've soured on Isaiah McKenzie, and so maybe if he can prove himself.
Can you be a slot receiver?
Can you be a weapon?
Not just a gadget guy. Can you actually run routes?
Yes. Can you be a guy that contributes to this team more? So I would like to see those things. But Spencer Brown concerns me because now I think technically since that game, this is going on a 3-week. If he goes into not practicing for the remainder of this week like he did last week, that goes on about a 3-week not practicing injury, because we had the bye. So I would assume that the injury happened during the game before the bye, and that he wouldn't have been practicing the last 2-week windows, even with the bye.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, but I want to see Spencer Brown get a limited practice in here.
They clearly don't think it needs to go on the IR, though, because like if you're hanging on to a possible 3-week window, you probably would have gone IR if you thought it was going to linger for a month. So they also must think he's somewhat close.
Not that far off. That far off. So, we'll go in here, and as we kind of pivot over to our Uncle Jumbo's spotlight, it's not necessarily a player. I'm going to put you to the test because I know you had tweeted a little bit
trivia?
about it earlier. I'm going to put the spotlight on curses. We have 2 different curses going into this game that people have been very concerned with.
I thought you were talking about me cursing for a second.
And your love of cursing. Josh Allen going on the Manning cast. Every active player who has gone on the Manning cast through 6 weeks lost the next game, and apparently the uniform combination we have here. What a better time to shatter 2 nonsense curses than to do it against the Jags.
Yeah. So our buddy Bruce, big not believer in curses. I actually believe in curses. I do. I think people can be cursed. I think people can put curses on other people if they work with a spiritual guru of some kind that can do curses. But I do think people can be cursed, or that luck comes in those types of stretches. I don't believe the Bills uniforms have anything to do with it. I'm not sold the Manning cast has a curse yet. I don't think there's a big enough sample size.
Yeah, 6 games probably isn't sufficient.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, he's not wrong. If the Bills lose, curses are the only explanation, because there's no other reason they should lose.
If there was ever a curse to be had on this Bills team, it's that I don't know the total facts of this. I've just read blogs. Is that the stadium was built on an old burial ground, like some of the facility, and that is what cursed the Bills in the Super Bowl years, is that there's like ghosts of Indians on the, so maybe when they move the stadium, that curse will be removed.
There you go. Maybe that'll be what's needed.
But yeah, no, I'm not buying any of this crap. I don't care what uniform combos they win. If they don't crush the Jaguars, then I'll consider a curse. But
yeah,
I think they're going to crush them.
No, I agree, and with our Uncle Jumbo's, I'm really excited to be able to see the new bourbon that's coming up. It's very very close. I'm very excited to be able to see that. But this is going to be a fun week to be able to see. There's some pieces, whether it's via injury, whether it's just being cautious with who is out there getting reps. I'm excited to see them continue to work their way through this. I had speculated a little bit with the Dolphins game and some of the play calling that I think they're intentionally not showing all their cards. They're intentionally not using all their play calls. We saw, Eric explained where maybe it wasn't quite as dramatic as people made it out to be, but there was a pretty significant shift in that Chiefs game where we saw Reggie Gilliam 50% of the snaps and things like that. I do think they have some things up their sleeve for specific matchups that they're not going to show in a stretch like this. And it doesn't mean that they're calling bad plays. It doesn't mean that they're not trying their best to be successful. It just means that they're going to stay within their pretty standard 11 personnel. They're not going to be pulling out a lot of different fancy things that they don't need to use in this stretch. And I actually think that's a good exercise to be able to go through to say, hey, no, you guys need to execute. You need to be able to show that you're the superior team and that you're going to be able to go through. And real quick here, I see this comment. That is what I heard as well, is that Spencer Brown was working out in the weight room, and that's where the back injury came from.
Rough.
I don't know anything beyond there. I don't know if it was a deadlift or
I missed
a
that.
specific
That's
thing.
even worse.
He was working. It was in a workout in the weight room. And that's where I hurt his back.
Tough.
Where it comes from.
I've never been in a weight room, but I hear that
You've heard interesting things about them. I've heard rumors about the weight room. I didn't know exactly how it works
dangerous.
Myself.
Yeah.
But it's something where as we get into it, I know you did some awesome work on the graphics. Let's go a little bit further into the breakdown itself here before we do our predictions. And we can start with explosive plays.
Yes. So the thing that really stands out the most here on the explosive plays is really the Buffalo Bills defense. Even the amount of explosive pass plays that Jags have given up, 34 just in pass, which is what James was talking about. Like Josh Allen.
We played the worst one last week, and now the second worst this week.
Yes, and I actually am shocked that I haven't watched the Jags the last couple of games that it's not worse. I thought they would be the runaway number one, but Miami's had some bad games too. But it's a race to the bottom between these two teams, and I think Josh Allen's going to help that this week. But you add up the two Bills explosive pass and explosive run, and it's only 27. So they're like total defense explosive plays. They're super limiting right
55,
now.
They have more than double altogether. In their two, and it's more than that just in the pass by itself.
Yes, and hopefully the Bills here can crack. I do want to see them crack into the top 10 here in explosive pass plays because it's just something I think we've come to expect from this offense. I think over this next stretch here, they will crack into that. And we want to see I know we're giving the run game a hard time, and I'm not super hard on the run game, but I do want to see if you're not going to have a super successful run game, at least get some explosives out of it when you need it. So I would like to see that in the 15 range where Jacksonville is right now. I'm actually a little jealous of Jacksonville's run game at the moment because I do think they're doing some nice things there, and that's where I would like to be right there. But other than that, this game, like all these other stats, very heavily favors the Bills.
Yeah, and the same thing, you see that carried through on the DVOA side. As you look at it, it's,
what you would expect.
Yeah, it's exactly what you would expect, and what we see is just. Yeah.
So for those
30th against first.
Yeah. So for those just listening here to the podcast, the Jaguars overall are 30th, offense 24th, defense 32nd, special teams 21st. And Bills, if you haven't seen the updates, the overall first, offense 11th, even though their weighted offense is 9th, so they are still technically a top 10 offense. Defense is first, as we know, all season long here. And special teams has crept into the top 10, despite a super inconsistent kicker and a fumble by Isaiah McKenzie. Tyler Bass just dragging the special teams unit
and the coverage units.
And the coverage units, dragging this group into the top 10. So congratulations to Heath Farwell and his group there. Should be better if they could clean up some of those mistakes. But this is a total lopsided match on paper, obviously.
Yeah, the first defense in the NFL against the 32nd.
Not good.
That's a tough one. So the 24th offense against our first defense, their 32nd defense against our 11th top 10 offense. That's a tough combination.
Tough break.
And, it's one of those things where we talked about it last week. It's the same thing this week. I'm glad that we have a coach who is incredibly disciplined, detail-oriented, laser-focused on a game-to-game mentality, preaches it. You hear Josh Allen reinforce that. You hear all the players reinforce it. They are not going to overlook an opponent. They're not going to take someone lightly. They're going to go game by game. It's kind of hard as a fan where we're talking about, let people sit out, rest people. We can look beyond it, and it's because when you look at a game like this, it's really hard to find the matchups that they're going to win. You would need their Josh Allen to just take over a game with huge, impactful plays. You would need Laviska Shenault to break something big. Like Marvin Jones is a good receiver. He's not a game-breaking guy who's going to break some huge long play. James Robinson is a really good chain mover and talent, but if he's out, Carlos Hyde is not a guy that you're, maybe he breaks some tackles, I guess. It's really hard to find the matchup that they're going to run away with here. And, as I dove into it, Vegas has it at 48.5 for the over-under, the Bills at 14.5. So Vegas has it at 31-17, roughly, right in that ballpark. I have it just one stretch beyond there. I have them at 34-17. I won't even be shocked if they don't get 17 on the Bills, but they've had some pretty solid garbage time with a guy like Lawrence, but I have it 34-17.
Yeah, so one of the things that is interesting about this team, because I never tend to err on the side of caution, right? Like I'm a firm believer in it's a week-to-week league. Yeah. Even, the last week in Miami, I thought was a good kind of gut check punch in the mouth that you really can't sleep on. The stats we showed here were the same a week ago looking at Miami, and every indication watching the tape, watching the game, did not look like that should have been a 3-3 game at halftime. And I think we all agree, and we've talked about why it ended up that way, but it can in the NFL, and a game can get away from you. I think the only way the Jags stay in this type of game is a punt getting blocked, blocked field goal,
Jamal Agnew taking one back,
and it might take 2-3 of those types of like pretty big plays, a pick six type of thing. A big game swinging plays are going to be what keeps Jacksonville, I think, in this game, just because the talent. And that's the most exciting thing about this Bills team is I do think you can have this conservative approach we're talking about, because I believe in the depth on this roster. I still believe that Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie against nickel of the Jacksonville Jaguars and their linebackers can be a winning matchup for this team. I don't think that hurts you and that you're going to have some like big hole to fill. And so I think that our willingness to take that conservative approach with this team as fans speaks more to the confidence in the depth than it does, hey, this opponent totally sucks. I really am confident in the depth that, hey, they can go out there and play, and I want to see it before we really need them down the road against the better opponent. So just to clarify where I'm at on that, Will McBills here, missed the past couple of games, just moved back into town. Go Bills. Welcome back into town, man. Yeah. Just in time for the cold, crappy weather. In Western New York. Congratulations.
Sadly, we had like some sleet and snow type crap here today.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
And Eric, don't worry. I have been forced into my fate. I have to have a ribeye.
Bullying works.
Yes, bullying works. It's really effective. I even joked about maybe I was going to make chili, and then I had to be beaten into submission. So don't worry, I will not forget my ribeye. It will be done.
That's right. Hey, I'm just trying to keep your butcher in business. That's all. I care about local business.
He's doing just
I'm sure
fine.
He's doing great. So for this matchup, though, I'm pretty close to you on this one, Greg. I had it 34-13. I agree. I don't think that they get to 17. And I really had to talk myself down from going 38-13 on this one, because I do think the Bills got notified last week that they can't have those types of halves, and I think that they come out,
jump out earlier.
Yeah, I think they come out with some purpose here and really put up some points, and then make this a fun Sunday afternoon for they go travel down, get a little warm weather in northern Florida, and then come back up here to Buffalo with a dub.
Yeah, and I do think it's it's an interesting stretch. Some people consider it a little bit boring, but this is we're not used to having boring stretches because we're so
Everything
much
mattered.
better. Yeah, we were so used to needing every single week, and this week leaving some of that sleety stuff. I just looked it up. Jacksonville, Florida, this Sunday, 68 and sunny, 0% chance of rain. Perfect weather, literally
80% chance of
weather.
Bombs, Josh Allen bombs all over the city.
But yeah, it's gonna be. I don't see how they hang in this game. I just don't see it.
Yeah, no, I think again, Miami kept that close for a minute. I don't know that you can continue to play with the Bills with such a low level of talent in terms of depth across your team. I think the Bills have too much depth across the board. They're too sound. There's too much continuity. It's just there's so much momentum going forward with this team that even if they have a bad game, I think a bad game for them is what we saw against Miami, which is still covering a 13.5 point spread, which is exactly how I expect this game to go. Even if they stumble at points in this game, I think the talent's just too great. And at any time it just turns on and it becomes a 14, 15 point game like that.
Yeah, it's a perfect example where, even an ugly game, they still covered, they still pulled away, they still were able to pour it on. So, everybody watch for that. We'll keep an eye on the injury report as the week goes. If there's anything else odd that comes up, I hope they do err on the side of caution and hold some of those guys out. Hopefully we start to see some of those guys step in and be able to get some practices in where it's just precaution and not because they're forced to stay out. But we'll see where that goes. Make sure you guys are checking out everything we have going on the network. So many exciting things coming up, whether it's with our sponsors, Uncle Jumbo's, or the Underdog Fantasy app. Make sure that you're taking a look at all the other shows going on. I know Anthony had an awesome show right before us, breaking down the running game on Disguised Coverage. You guys on the Hoof last night. You've got Cover One Roundup on Monday nights. We've got our fantasy show on Thursday nights, and Aaron and I will be back here with Anthony Prohaska right after the game on Sunday. Thankfully, we have another 1 p.m. kickoff. 1 p.m. football is elite football. We got a couple more of those here before we, I think, all the way up to Thanksgiving. Will be 1 o'clock games all the way through there. So thankful for that, and then we'll have a little bit of a stretch, and then we'll end the season with a nice 1 o'clock stretch for the last couple weeks. So make sure you're checking out everything we have going on. If you like what you hear here, give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review, subscribe to wherever you're listening to us, and most importantly, check out what we have going on with our premium content. The Cover One community that we have built, and that we're able to talk back and forth. We use a app called Slack where you're able to come in there, and it's almost like your own personal Bill's Twitter or Facebook. It's a group. There's 500 active users on there all the time, and on game day it's amazing. I know you're a huge part of the game day discussion in there, and really have just an awesome back and forth, being able to go with educated, intelligent Bills fans having a good time. Come and check us out. We have it in the description for the show here, whether you're listening on iTunes or Google Podcasts or Spotify, or whether you're checking it out on YouTube. We have it in the show description. You could find out a little bit more about it, but it's really what keeps us going here and helps pay for all the cool stuff where Aaron goes and puts together those graphics from Football Outsiders and Sports Information Systems and all the cool video breakdowns that Eric does. You guys support us to be able to have access to those things by doing those premium sponsorships. So check it out. It really means a lot. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Slack, probably the coolest thing about that is you said the 500 active users, and they're from all over the place.
Crazy.
So I'll wake up in the morning at like 6:30 and check my phone, and there'll have been a long couple-hour conversation throughout the middle of the night of people. So like, no matter where you are and what time zone you're in, if you're looking for Bills talk that is off social media, that was always my frustration. Facebook Bills talk is crazy, and it just was head pounding, annoying. And Twitter can get really contentious too. Like, people at their takes are out there and they're public, and people start fluffing each other up, where I think there's really good conversations. We get heated and go through some conversations, but it always is respectful. It's always nice. And you can hop in I'll be
anytime
noon on a Wednesday and just have an idea and hop in the Slack and throw it in there like a grenade, and everybody's chatting. So if you're like a diehard Bills fan and just looking to chat with other Bills fans, I think it's the best space, because it's always active and there's always somebody willing in there to take whatever grenade you toss in there for any type of argument, Bills related.
So we appreciate it. Make sure you're checking us out here. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.